8,200 U.S. service members were listed as missing in action following the Korean War. Of those soldiers, Marines, and airmen who did not return home, some were known to have been prisoners. Their names and photographs either appeared in the communist press or they were listed on early Red Cross reports as prisoners of war. The United States realizes that we will never know with certainty the fate of every unaccounted for service member. We realize that some POWs died of disease, of wounds, or of the hardships of captivity in camps on or near the Korean Peninsula, and that the majority of our POWs, certainly those who were repatriated, did not encounter Soviet personnel. We also understand that the mood of the times, the height of the Cold War, made it a reasonable course of action from Moscow's point of view to exploit the opportunity to gain control of select American POWs. Our research has led us to the conclusion that, in the words of one Russian participant, tens if not hundreds of our POWs were transferred to the former Soviet Union. We need the assistance of our colleagues on the Russian delegation to the Joint Commission in order to determine their fates. If some have survived, we wish to offer them repatriation. If they are all deceased, we wish to repatriate their remains. We do not wish to assign blame. We want to put this issue behind us. But we cannot do so as long as the families of these lost service members have unanswered questions. In December, we gave you a document entitled Summary of Information, which provided the basis for our belief that U.S. Korean War POWs were transferred to the territory of the former USSR. Now we would like to briefly show you eyewitness testimony that reinforces this conclusion. As we have learned through documents provided by the Russian side of the Commission, Stalin believed that the possession of POWs could provide useful bargaining leverage. Stalin's communications with Zhou Enlai reflect this. Stalin counseled the Chinese to hold up to 20% of U.S. and Allied POWs when the bulk of the prisoners were repatriated. In November 1992, Colonel General Volkoganov testified before the Senate Select Committee on POW MIA affairs.
It's indicating this.
Хотя это допускаю, потому что в Корее представители спецслужб допрашивали американских летчиков. И если исходить из по аналогии, то можно допустить, что подобное случится и во Вьетнаме.
But I believe it is possible because in Korea, agents of our special services did interrogate American pilots. So by logic, it is possible that the same was done in Vietnam.
О том, что допрашивали в Корее, есть неопровержимые доказательства в виде протоколов этих допросов.
There is irrefutable evidence that this was done in Korea. We have documents of the interrogations.
The lessons we in the Commission have learned from our efforts concerning Korea are that if we persevere in our joint cooperation, and if we supplement our archival search with interviews of living participants, we can uncover additional information about what happened in Korea, even when the trail is 40 years old. Here are a few randomly selected photographs of unaccounted for U.S. service members from the Korean War, men who could have been candidates for transport to the former Soviet Union as part of such a program. Most would have been aviators, men who possessed information on our strategic bombers, fighter aircraft, and related technologies. What became of these missing Americans? Retired Colonel G.I. Korotkov of the GRU, Soviet Military Intelligence, has provided additional information. During a series of interviews in Moscow and again during the December meeting of the Joint Commission, Colonel Korotkov described his experiences during the Korean War. A junior officer and English speaker, he was posted to Khabarovsk, a Soviet city near the theater of war. Colonel Korotkov described how on 2 occasions he traveled to the Korean-Soviet border area, to an ill-defined location that could have been in Korea or in the Soviet Union, where he and his colleagues personally interrogated U.S. POWs. Colonel Korotkov met and interrogated these Americans while wearing his Soviet officer's uniform. This happened in a war zone where Army officers were only permitted to wear their Soviet uniforms when on Soviet soil. Officers who entered China or North Korea wore Chinese or Korean uniforms. Colonel Korotkov recalls that U.S. POWs were escorted to him by a female border guards officer, also wearing a Soviet uniform. However, no repatriated POWs recall such incidents. Recently, a Western journalist videotaped an interview with Colonel Korotkov, in which he explicitly states that U.S. POWs were moved through the city of Khabarovsk.
Я могу только сказать, и там говорил, что через Хабаровск американские пленные провозились. Это я могу сказать.
He knows for sure that they were taken through Khabarovsk, American POWs.
Ну, чтобы там их допрашивали или останавливали, этого не было.
They did not stop them, they were not interrogated there.
В этом не было нужды, мы могли легко выехать рядом границы.
There was no need because they could easily go to the border areas.
Вот такая ситуация.
But not all of the direct evidence on POW transfers to the Soviet Union comes from Russian sources. The People's Republic of China was also instrumental in the exploitation of U.S. POWs. Russian sources admit close cooperation with the Chinese. Now let's listen to a Chinese veteran, Mr. Pinghua Xu, a former officer in the Chinese People's Volunteers who personally witnessed the handover of U.S. POWs to Soviets.
因为我是一个公民啊，我应当忠实的，真实的，把我所见到的，我亲眼看到的，我亲身经历的，我提供出来。我不是亲眼见到的，不是听到的，我不知道就不知道。那我亲眼见到，我亲眼听到的，就两个部分，一个就是我亲眼看到是处理战俘。 伤病战俘，我亲眼看到在我附近打死的，这个我作证这个是没有问题的。第二，我亲眼看到这3个 pilot 是交给苏联人的。
You say I'm an American citizen.
Yeah.
I honestly and loyally want to say to my country. Okay. Two major things I like to say. I'm the witness, eyewitness. First, execution the POW, just in front of me. Many of them. The second is 3 pilots transferred to Russia.
Yeah.
I was there, eye to eye.
我们到长河洞以后啊，到长河洞的时候啊，我第二次看到就是苏联人，他们穿的志愿军的军装。 几个人？10个，大概有10个。不是，这里边有的大鼻子哈，有的好像也是像不是大鼻，但是他们也讲俄语的。就苏联人不一定都是2个10个。
We saw around 10 Soviet military
官员
people in the transfer center. They have same PLA Chinese uniform.
Where was the transfer center located?
长河洞。
然后我们这个志愿军总部也有很多翻译，就是
我先说对，先长河洞。
然后我们就把他这3个，他什么都不要，他就要3个服兵员去。
怎么样手续？
属于说我们教他之后，就有2个翻译官嘛，志愿军翻译官嘛，带他们去，就是见面之后，我们也跟进去之后，他们就给他讲俄语嘛，就指着这3个人就是。然后我们就交，然后外边有那个吉普车嘛。我们回去的时候啊，我们回去休息的时候，大概没有1个小时，3个人都上吉普车走了，很快。一共有4、5辆吉普车，还有中型的、小型的，就押他们3个人。1个小时以后。
When they arrived at the transfer center, POW transfer center, Changhe-dong, right away they escort the 3 pilots to an office. There's 2 Russia translator, Chinese translator. They can speak Russian. Together with them, accompany the 3 pilots, and Mr. Xu went in the office. They met the Russians. Just right away, give it to them, and they left.
They handed the 3 pilots over to the Russians.
Over to Russians.
Okay.
我们那个 组长啊跟我讲，他说这个苏联人要派了。
The head of his group say the Soviet, they want the pilots.
就他们先跟我讲，他说都到苏联去，我这是一个组嘛，整个的大概全部都有这个规定吧，凡是打下来的这个美国飞行员，大概都要都有苏联人来接的。我这是这一个情况就可以说明了嘛，是不是
？He only heard about just like a policy also from the other groups, from other units.
Mm-hmm.
If you got the American pilots, all of them have to send it to Russia.
In Russia, and in other states emerging from the former Soviet Union, a number of aging veterans of the Gulag have come forward to report contacts with U.S. service members in the camp system. Mr. Nikolai Kozersky was imprisoned in the Zimka labor camp from 1950 to 1955. Mr. Kozersky met and spoke with an American inmate, a military aviator from the Korean War. Kozersky provided a detailed description of the American, which enabled us to correlate his sighting with this man, First Lieutenant Ara Moradian of Fresno, California. Mr. Kozersky examined a lineup of 16 photographs of missing U.S. aviators. Despite the passage of more than 40 years, Kozersky selected 4 of the 16 whom he believed resembled the prisoner he had met. One of the 4 was Lieutenant Moradian. Lithuanian parliamentarian Balas Gajauskas spent decades in the Gulag. He too reports encountering an American from Korea in the camp system in the Balkash area in the 1950s.
There was one American there.
Он мне рассказал, что его привезли с Дальнего Востока, лагерь, там, где были иностранцы, и они были закрыты, они ничего не знали, и, ну, вообще никаких связей никто ничего не имели.
He told me that he had been brought from a camp in the Far East, and in this Far Eastern camp, it was a closed camp. They didn't have any contacts with the outside world, and it was basically a closed camp that he had been brought from.
Он среднего роста был.
He was of medium height.
Он худощавый, ну, знаете, в лагерь худощавый.
He was somewhat slim or slender. Everybody was slim and slender in the camp.
И он по характеру, он был очень такой, ну, он может подойти к каждому вроде человеку. Он такой имел коммуникабельный, как говорят.
He was a very communicative, gregarious person who easily accessed other people.
А или в городке его арестовали. Да вот я не знаю, там, где зашли эти советы. Я так вот сейчас помню, потому что как он мог очутиться из этой части, ну, где их арестовали, потому что и корейцев было из северной части, арестованных в северной части корейцев, то в нашем лагере было 50 корейцев.
Okay, there were 50 Koreans in his camp, and he was arrested in the mountains in an area where the Soviets were located.
Retired Lieutenant Colonel Philip Corso of the U.S. Army worked in Korea as the officer responsible for monitoring the status of U.S. POWs, after which he worked on the National Security Council. Lieutenant Colonel Corso developed intelligence information that proved to him that U.S. POWs were transferred to Soviet territory, which he, in turn, reported to President Eisenhower.
I was chief of what we call the Special Projects Branch of the Far East Command, G2 Intelligence Division. And that job entailed, in addition to many other duties like targeting and so forth, it entailed that I keep track of all the prisoner of war camps, our prisoners, how they were being treated, and where they were, and who was in charge and how they were interrogated and so forth. That was actually my duty. and I was head of the division at MacArthur's headquarters. I had definite information of train loads, 2 certain, possibly 3. Each train held 450 prisoners. These prisoners were taken from North Korea through Mukden, Manchuria, to Manchuria. Manchuria is on the border of Manchuria and Russia, where the gauge changes. That meant that the prisoners would be transferred from one train to the other over a landing. And that was the point where most of the prisoners were seen and recognized as Americans. And they were heading to the Soviet Union over the border in the Soviet train, which gauge was the Chinese train. And then I secured this information from, I'd say, hundreds of prisoner of war reports, Chinese and North Korean, who actually saw these prisoners being transported and talked to some of them. We had guerrillas and agents in the area who saw these prisoners being transported. And later I talked to a few high-level Soviet defectors who confirmed it, that this transfer was going on. Only the Soviets had perfected the system and is very sophisticated in the way they operated. Also, we had information that once the information was taken from them and they were used as the Soviets saw fit to use them, then they were eliminated and they would never come back, which actually happened. They never came back. So mostly, my information on numbers and transfer of prisoners was not from defectors. I didn't need that from defectors. We had that information. But the operation within the Soviet Union and the way they did, what they treated and what they did with these prisoners, that was where we were lacking in a lot of information. So that I tried to get, and I got it from defectors.
The U.S. side of the Joint Commission realizes the problems faced by our Russian counterparts in researching this issue. Such a POW transfer operation clearly would have been very closely controlled and highly secret. We know that when many of our Russian counterparts say to us that no such transfer ever took place, they are being honest and sincere, since they personally have no knowledge of the transfers, and these records, if they have not been destroyed, remain a closely guarded secret. We further realize that those few who should have knowledge of the POW transfers to the former USSR may be able to speak out for a variety of reasons, not the least of which might be state security. Certainly we understand that these operations were never meant to see the light of day. But no one could foresee that our countries would develop the friendly relations we witness today. We respectfully request your cooperation as we move on with our attempts to identify those POWs who may have been transferred and to determine what became of them. It is our hope that this film will advance the work of the Commission by providing a better understanding of why our people believe that these prisoner transfers took place.